Happy Wednesday, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here today. This is a continuation of our countdown series. We're going to do a little debriefing around the recent DEF CON conference out in Las Vegas that Bryan and I attended last week. So thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Bryan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, Brian Taylor, nice to meet you. I'm head of technical pre-sales for North America at Cybellum.
And I'm Sean Barry. I'm on the business development side here at Cybellum. And today we're going to, as I mentioned, talk about, DEF CON. We're going to introduce what this conference is and what it means to cybersecurity. Talk about our topics and takeaways. And then, of course, some of the things we learned, we're going to kind of relay in terms of do's and don'ts for next year, as we definitely intend to be there and hope to see some of you there as well. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started here. I guess maybe to kind of tee things up a bit. So like last week, I got a call just a few days prior to DEF CON and said, hey, are you interested in going out and joining Bryan at this conference? And I won't say they were asking me to chaperone Bryan here, but it certainly was something that I was interested in for a while now because I had heard about this particular conference. It's like pretty notorious in the tech space, and but I didn't really know much about it. So I got on the line with Bryan, and he quickly sold me on how fun it would be and how much I learned, and that certainly was the case. So in terms of DEF CON, since you're the best salesman for it, Bryan, at least to me, why don't you tell us a little bit of like what DEF CON is?
Yeah, so DEF CON's traditionally, I'd say one of the most hackery, if not the most hackery cons out there. By that, I mean, not really a lot of vendors, a lot of focus on things like CTFs, capture the flags. This year was great in terms of a breakdown of villages. I mean, there was XR Village, AV Village, Radio Ham Village, everything you could think of village, biohacking village, automotive village. So, and they bring people in and they do CTFs for all those different types of devices and areas. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that later on here. But this room you see right in front of you is kind of the chill out room from this year that they set up. And also kind of one of the main stages. They had 2 stages every night just for the official DEF CON party. Because we all know DEF CON parties are staple as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about the CTFs in a second and the villages too, because those are huge features of DEF CON. But I mean, I think a lot of it for me kind of like fit the stereotype, if you will. And this picture is like a good representation of it. You had a lot of hackers and like dark rooms on computers, like doing all kinds of fun stuff. And there was like all this like kind of like electronic techno music in the background. There was tons of these rooms. It's a massive conference. There's like 30,000 people plus from
4
all
casinos.
over the world. Yeah, 4 casinos. We were at the Caesars Forum, which was a massive, convention center, and I think every room was utilized in some way. So this was just one room in the chill out room, as they call it, where you can just grab a bite, sit down, and just kind of recharge a bit. So.
One cool thing, go back one real quick, Sean. All right. One cool thing I wanted to highlight in this room that they had this year was the soda machine. And soda it looked just like a soda machine. You can Google it, check it out on Twitter. It wasn't actually a soda machine. Soda stands for Shell On Demand Appliance. And you can actually walk up to this thing and it would dispense virtual, like disposable machines out of it in codes. So instead of getting a drink a can of soda, you can get a VM of soda. And that was a pretty cool thing in that room.
Yeah, there was like a pretty long line for that. I saw. I mean, I think I asked you to explain this concept, like what Shell on Demand was, like 4 times. I'm not entirely sure I still know it, but nonetheless, I was like, that's pretty cool. So there's all kinds of cool like niche things there and ways that people just like interact. And honestly, the amount of like effort that goes into putting this thing on is absolutely it's just massive. So we talked about, you mentioned it, Bryan, the villages, like what's kind of like behind the villages? Like what's the whole concept here?
Yeah, it's kind of like a focus on a unique industry, what their devices are, because a lot of them have same device profiles. Like there's also like an embedded systems village or people were looking at like all different types of embedded systems, and ICS village where people are looking at, industrial control stuff. So But this, these are basically what they did this year was they kind of ran a demo room where they had some of the devices. You could interact with them if you wanted, and then they had a separate CTF room, and then usually there was a third speaker room. So you get like kind of 3 rooms for some of the villages, especially biohacking. So you can kind of go and listen to them talk on some tracks like securing the system from corporal to corporate,
Yep.
all the way to watching people hack to interacting with people that actually make these devices, and talking to them and understanding how their device works and what their product security framework looks like, frankly.
Totally. Yeah, this is definitely my favorite part of DEF CON. So DEF CON is, think of it as like the wrapper of, and we'll get to the badges in a minute, but the DEF CON is like the wrapper of all these sub kind of conferences within it. And they have that kind of generic format Bryan mentioned. And I really, really loved the biohacking village because there was a ton of medical device manufacturers there. There's probably like 8 or 9. And they brought the product security team and their product managers. And then as Bryan was saying, like right in the room next door, there was, a couple dozen hackers at least each day, just trying to hack into the products that they brought. And then when they would find something, they would, showcase what they found and how they did it. It's pretty cool. Yeah, show us your badge there.
Yeah, and we had to do things like, sign a consent form before we could even get in the room to look at the medical devices, that we would not disclose anything outside of that room. So it's kind of a unique niche spirit. So this is the biohacking village badge. It's a really cool heart. It's actually 3D printed by Protivity. One of the cool things, if you're not familiar with it, kind of like hacker history, culture parts of DEF CON is badges. And every year they make a different unique badge. I've got the press badge this year with me. So they kind of got
Don't
this
ask him how he got it.
cool green thing. Yeah,
that's a big story.
I have a press badge. So and every village has a different badge. You'll see some better pictures later, but this is aerospace, one of the aerospace ones. Anyways, long story short, there were people all around the place, wearing different badges from this year, from last year. I know, Sean, I know you said one of the favorite ones you saw was the keyboard from last year's DEF CON, where you can actually play musical notes on it. But some of the badges this year have like Wi-Fi on them, full USB-C. Like it's pretty wicked. And actually in the aerospace one, the badge, you can use it to jump onto the CTF server. So there's a external CTF, and there's also kind of like a badge only CTF that is self-contained. So cool stuff.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that aerospace CTF in a minute for people to learn more about like the CTF structure and stuff. And there's the automotive one if you can see the image. But basically these badges, they're really cool because they're meant as like they're meant to like play around with and hack and modify and do some like penetration testing and type stuff, which is pretty cool. And then there's like add-ons as well that you can get for them, and they're all kind of specific to each village. I just want to round out the villages really quick. So we're looking at this slide. Just as kind of a way to talk about it all. So we talked about the biohacking village, a little bit of the aerospace. The car hacking village was really cool. They had like a Tesla there that people were hacking into and whatnot. And there's all these competitions for it. But there's other really cool ones like the physical security village, which is this top one on the right in green, where you could, there's a whole other side of security, which is the physical side, like breaking into like buildings and getting access to like information and like lock boxes and stuff like that. There's also a place at DEF CON where you can learn to actually lockpick, and they sell you like the tools to be able to do it, and they show you how to do it. And like people learn in like 10 minutes how to pick basic locks. The one that I think is really cool is the ham radio village. We walked by it, but you're telling me you can become like ham radio certified. Yeah. It's like pretty crazy. So there's all kinds of really cool nichey things there.
And one other thing too, that is the devices. Then there was the kind of like the OS int stuff, like the misinformation village. There was a voting village, right? There was a social engineering village. Big focus this year on vishing, which is, voice phishing, if you are not familiar with that topic. So tons of topics, tons of workshops, competitions, all sorts of stuff like that around that. So
yeah, that is awesome. So speaking of competitions, I think that's a good segue. So I'll tee this up for you. So here's the headline that was in Politico, which I thought was cool because it picked up basically DEF CON, but is the Capture the Flag event at the Aerospace Village, where you were able to essentially like hack a satellite that's actually in orbit. Is that correct, Bryan?
Yep. So they were running Hack-A-Sat 4 with some live sats this year. As you can see on that picture on the right side, that's actually the one I took of the leaderboard live while it was going on. It's a massive multi-day event. We actually met one of the guys who was at the first Hack-A-Sat 1, several years ago, and he told me that you can't just show up as any hacker and hack a satellite. You need to know, obviously, PhD level orbital mechanics, right? You need expert reverse engineering. You need all sorts of different skill sets. And so they come in with these different teams of people, and those are the team scores on the left of them all competing live. And it's like a 4-day hacking event. It's massive. The Aerospace Village, just in general, is really cool. They had drones you could hack into. They had all sorts of different badges. On the badges, they had SAOs that you could, solder onto your badges to get little cool extra things. They had live hacking for other types of aerospace, like manned vehicles. And they, on their stage, they had, seats from a plane, so it kind of looked like they were talking from a plane. This is a very cool village, and they got a huge space this year in Caesars Forum, as you can see. So a lot of great stuff in that space going on, a lot of great innovation there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really cool just to see that village has been around for 5 years. This is their 5th year from what it sounded like, and just be able to see kind of how like much it's grown and how robust everything was. Everything from the badges, which we have, to the extra touches like airplane seats that people are like able to like sit in and stuff like that. Yeah, and I think this picture here in the middle is like a good photo of like those capture the flag teams at work. They're there from sun up to sunset, or even just all the way through like the 2 days or 3 days that the events go on.
You just walk by and you see guys just pulling their hair out, just like literally just. Oh, sorry. There's got to be at least 10 people that have gone bald during DEF CON.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we're walking by, us two knuckleheads, just like, hey, what you working on? They're like trying to like apply orbital mechanics to like cyber and all this other stuff. So yeah, it was quite fun. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed watching the CTFs and everyone kind of applying themselves there. That was really cool. So yeah, that's the CTFs then. So in terms of where we spent our other chunk of time, so I think we probably walked around the villages most of the time, talking to people, asking good questions, learning how people approach problems. But then there's obviously the whole curriculum that is going on the whole time. There's like hundreds of presentations ongoing. So I guess one of the first ones we went to was the global approach to tackling software resilience. That was this kind of policy talk, and that was a lot of the flavor that you and I had. I think we both have that kind of interest, so we went to a lot of those kinds of discussions. But this one was pretty cool because you had Alan Freeman on it with a woman from the White House, and then a couple of colleagues from across the pond in Germany and in the UK, and just kind of hearing how they're working at the federal level to drive policies that are pushing the industry in the right way in terms of like software resilience. That was a pretty cool one. Any thoughts on that particular panel?
Yeah, it was a good panel, and they really highlighted well what they've done over the last decade, essentially, since they've all been working on this problem. And we saw this kind of theme with a lot of the policy where they would kind of like reiterate, hey, here's the problem, here's why we've been working on it, here's how long it's taken us to even move the needle. And one of my takeaways, frankly, was that in a lot of these industries, unless something affects a product's bottom line, they're not going to do anything about it. So unless the federal government starts regulating these things like they have with the omnibus bill, for healthcare, and like they have with some of the other ISOs, NERC, NIST stuff, the more we can get around that in cyber, and the more help we can get from the feds, the better I think we'll be as a country, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway too. We talked a lot about that in this other DEF CON, software bill of material working group type thing that we participated in. It was more ad hoc, but again, Alan Freeman kind of organized all the SBOM loyalists and folks at the conference to come through, and we had a bunch of Twinkies there. Actually, I think you can see the Twinkie box, but he lured everyone with Twinkies, and we had a really nice like hour 2 hour chat. And I think that was kind of the common theme was, cyber, how do you prioritize it in the discussion at your company and justify the investment there in terms of people, process, and technology. And there was the bottom line discussion that you talked about, and then there's also that kind of like top line discussion as well. Like, how can you maybe turn it into like a competency that you can drive revenue goals? Because you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, most senior executives are thinking about top line and bottom line. Those are that's the structure. So that was a really good chat too. I thought that there were other vendors there, not just Cybellum, and it was good to hear their perspective. And they seem to agree in a lot of things that they're seeing, at least. And then there was also folks from industry and customers too, right? Was there any like particular topics in that meetup that you thought were also like interesting?
So, I mean, there was some good stuff in the meetup, but what I want to touch on real quick is another session we went to that was policy based, was one with Suzanne Schwartz, and I believe it had Nitin from the federal government and from CISA, and a couple medical doctors who were also cyber guys, and a White House advocate, I believe. And it was really interesting. Honestly, my takeaway from it was, and like they said, we're kind of hanging on a string as a country, and when it comes to healthcare, the stat was like, there's 7,000 hospitals in the U.S. 85% of them have are small, medium-sized hospitals that have no security budget, where their head of surgery is also their head of cyber. So and that's where millions, tens of millions of Americans are dependent on care. So it's all about how can we empower the industry to kind of help that huge chunk of hospitals that, if they get hit by a ransomware, that hospital's shutting down. They're not going to be able to pay it. They function with maybe 6 weeks cash on hand. So, it shut down, or 4 weeks cash on hand. So they function for a 6-week ransomware attack, which is the average time. That's it for that hospital.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I forget the gentleman, but he had a lot of those stats on hand, and he was going through it. And it's certainly, you refer to it as like hanging by a string or a thread. But I think one of the other things he said too is like, our 9/11 moment is on the horizon, in a sense. Is what he said in some way. And I thought that was, a good way to underline the problem. And there was a lot of call to action in that certain discussion. So, and this was part of, it kind of goes back in all the DEF CON, how they run their tracks, right? So this was part of the do no harm series, right? And so, part of it, from what I understand, Bryan, right, and you were telling me about it, was like, this is, first of all, this session was, closed door, no phones, you weren't allowed to, record anything, all that. And there's a lot of like information sharing that's, a lot of like problems, here's where we screwed up, or here's where, this might have gone wrong, right? And I think they did do a little bit of that, but I think there was a lot of call to action in this, which might have been a little bit atypical for this series. You were saying something along the lines after we had left, so I just kind of bring up that nugget.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, and that one I think was the war stories one. So they kind of did like a war stories, do no harm portion, which was pretty cool for policy.
Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, there was some good SBOM centric, product security centric topics going on, and there's still much more to be done from an industry perspective, federal government perspective, and then of course, on the medical device manufacturer side, or even at the healthcare delivery organization level. So, and I think we already talked about securing the whole system, corporate to corporate, but I think there was a lot of the same kind of themes between those two, just underlining the challenges, right? So we'll move on for the sake of time. So I put together some takeaways, and I'm curious to see if you would agree with some of these. So first of all, my biggest takeaway, being a noob to this conference, was that it's super authentic. Everybody feels very empowered to be themselves there. And it might sound counterintuitive, but it makes sense. Like when you meet people there, which is quite easy, sometimes they'll give you their real name, or sometimes you'll meet a person named like Search. I sat next to a guy who just gave me his like username, basically. And the guy that runs the conference, they call him the Dark Tangent. Like that's his like moniker, right? And that doesn't sound authentic, but I think it's actually people being super comfortable with themselves and being able to like be something else that they like to be during this kind of event, or maybe this is their true personality in a way. But everyone's wearing like very comfortable casual clothing. There's not really any vendors there per se, like you would see at like a Black Hat or any other sort of like software centric conference. It's really all about the technology, and I really appreciated that. So like that was really cool, and I felt like my inner kind of nerd was coming out. So I think we probably agree on the authenticity side of things, especially with you and you walk around with bucket hats on the whole time. Um, I also think like product security, although there was a good spot for it there, it's still pretty niche. And so are SBOMs to go along with it. There's a lot of other really cool things around like pen testing, red team, all that kind of stuff. But this particular, topic is still kind of growing, so a lot of room to run there. And I really love the OEM attendance, especially the Biohacking Village. We talked about that already, but tons of OEMs there, just being super candid, having great conversations with hackers, and getting good information on how to make their products, that much safer. I thought that was honestly probably my favorite thing, and getting to talk to them about it. And also the subgroups within the villages. We talk about the villages, but the subgroups within DEF CON are really cool. So I was able to tough it out, wake up early, and go on 6 a.m. runs 2 days a week with the DEF CON run. Yeah, it's not really a village; it's just a collective or group that there's always like little offshoots of things that are going on at the conference. So it was really cool. So we ran into this Las Vegas sign. That was like a 6 mile run one morning, and that was good for me because I'm getting my marathon training in. But there's all kinds of stuff around this conference. It's really cool. And
yeah, so one of the things that I would have loved to do more, but we didn't really have time just because we were focused a lot on the healthcare and policies, like that, auto, industrial, was there was a huge push for AI, obviously, at this conference.
Yeah.
They had a whole thing where they did like a live hacking event with AI hacking versus humans hacking. And you can go check out the outcomes on that. There's a million articles about it. But there were there's a whole AI track. There was an AI village. There was like huge talk tracks on the main stage about AI. There's huge new frameworks unveiled, like Valid, which is an also awesome privacy-centric kind of like Tor plus IPFS kind of Web 2.5-ish mobile and full computer distributed peer-to-peer privacy. So check that out. That's one of the talks I went to, but a lot of cool stuff in the AI-centric realm with all the ChatGPT and Bard and all those fun products coming out, OpenAI.
Yeah, that was super cool. That was our first one too, the Valid stuff. I thought it was really interesting, and that was the challenge, was just where do we go? Because there's so many competing topics. So that was really rough, but we managed. And then that's a nice transition. So as we look ahead to next year, let's talk about some do's and don'ts. I'll handle the do's, you handle the don'ts. How about that? So do, a lot of people had backpacks, but Bryan and I rocked fanny packs, and that actually seemed to work out really well. We're able to fit enough in there without having to lug around a backpack all day. You don't necessarily really need your laptop unless you're going to be competing or doing some like furious note taking. We also, as I mentioned earlier, like rocked some bucket hats, and that seemed to be a pretty cool way to show that we're easy enough to talk to.
Yeah, out of all the weirdness at DEF CON, on the second day, Sean and I were pretty much the only people wearing bucket hats.
Yeah,
we saw a couple more the next few days, but that second day is no one. It was wild.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. I'm glad we did that. You kind of just my arm into that. I'm glad I did it. So that was fun. Appreciate that. Arrive early for the badges. There's the event badge. That's great to show up early for and make sure you get a cool one. And then I really loved all of the village badges. There was this automotive one that we didn't get. It was like a flux capacitor, and they just ran out quick of those. So next year gone within like an hour. People were lined up out the door. And when the biomedical badge dropped, like we ran over there to get yours, right? Like, so I mean, that just goes to show that people really like the merch there as well. I guess is could be considered badges, but the merch too, like these really cool DEF CON polos that I'm rocking right now. And you got a little DEF CON gear on too? Yep.
I got my DEF CON hat. I got a DEF CON shirt on.
Yeah.
No, I'm rocking an EFF shirt that I got at DEF CON. So a lot of cool
Yeah,
vendors there.
it's
Selling some
cool
cool.
to be able to get some cool swag for people too. That couldn't make it. I saw some people wearing camelbacks around. I thought that was a good idea, especially at least the days that you were like in a long line for the merch and stuff. Like, not a bad idea. So,
Especially with how it was. I mean, you're walking around with water and it's warm in like 30 minutes. So yeah, definitely
yeah,
a great idea.
yeah, it was 100 out in Vegas. So there's that.
Camelback pack is what we need.
There you go. Look at that innovation on this call. I like it. Portable phone charger. I think that's a must need. You shouldn't be using your phone too much at this event, frankly, and we'll talk about it on the don't. But it was good to have on hand just in case because they're long days. And then finally, there's a really good app that they have all the schedules that you can filter for by the villages and by the days and search for relevant speakers. It's the official event app. It's called Hacker Tracker, and that was a good thing to have had showing up to the event because all your information was in your hand. So that rounds out the do's. Bryan, why don't you tackle the old don'ts here?
Yeah, so a couple things. Obviously it's a hacker event. There are black hat people there. There are people trying to take credentials. There's even a whole like on the DEF CON Wi-Fi for people that screw up or do things like without encryption. They have what's called the wall of sheep, and they have a room where they project all your information onto this giant screen. So you can use Wi-Fi, but you got to be very careful with it. Only the officially sanctioned Wi-Fi, and only if you're going to use it, make sure you're using a VM or and VPN, and any overlays. Basically, no connections to your physical computer. Frankly, the best thing to do would be bring a burner laptop if you could do it, or a burner tablet. And definitely no Bluetooth, definitely no near field communication. Ton of issues with that. You want to meet people as well. This is probably the best con out there to meet other hackers. So, everyone is pretty friendly, in my opinion, and Sean can comment on this in a minute, but
Totally.
definitely stick to yourself. It's good to meet other people, and you'll get invited to parties. You'll go out and do fun stuff at night. And of course, don't book travel too late because, I know I got my travel basically in the last week that I could get room blocks through the DEF CON site. And then Sean got his, and it was already past that, and he ended up paying almost 2x. So
yeah, week of.
And then, of course, leaving without a specific plan, it's good to kind of the Hacker Tracker app. What's great about it, you can go through and kind of say yes, like star, 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 and then it will create your own personal schedule for you. So that's is a really nice way to figure out what you wanted to do. And then, of course, don't always rely on credit cards, another NFC thing that you don't want to always be doing. Cash is king. You want to buy in if you don't get a badge ahead of time, which I think it was at least 6 weeks ahead of time. You had to get prepay online.
Yep.
You had 448 this year cash. So we had wait in line.
Steep.
It wasn't too bad. I thought it was going to be a 4 a.m. line con thing. But we got there at about 6:10. They started at 7. We got through the line within 45 minutes. It was a ton of fun. They had beach balls. They were hitting all over the place. And like you couldn't even think a ball would just hit you in the head, and then you like moved up in the line. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a good time. It was, the line went quick once it got moving, once they started getting the badges out there. So that's that kind of rounds out the do's and don'ts. And it's pretty simple. More to learn more. They've got a pretty robust website, defcon.org. They already have the dates out for next year, next August. So you and I have a little under a year now to recover and recharge. I certainly need some more time. It's been a few days, but I'm still feeling pretty rough. But it's something that's already on the calendar. And I thought there was a really good documentary on YouTube, DEF CON, the full documentary. Just search for that. Pretty easy watch. And that kind of gives you a good flavor of everything more than Bryan and I were able to relay here. And then actually, this that I'm actually really looking forward to as well is they post the entire kind of curriculum of at least all the recorded talks will eventually make their way to YouTube. So if there's something you missed, or even things from the past, 20 something, 30 years, they're on YouTube right now. And so you can kind of see some really cool topics there and do some home education, if you will. Any other resources that people should keep in mind, Bryan?
No, I mean, the one cool thing what I noticed was in the vendor area, they actually had like physical DEF CON where you can like buy a hard drive that had all the recordings on it, or you could buy, some just the official track or whatever, and it was like a couple $100. So if you were spread thin and not one or two people there, it was a good way to kind of buy in. And they also had a live peer-to-peer torrent server, I believe,
Hmm.
going. Was like live streaming, or not live streaming, live seeding all of the recordings as they went up. So if you brought a big hard drive with you, you could definitely pull all that stuff down. So one of the cool things to kind of think about when you're there next time, or bring with.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people just get excited about the content alone. So it's pretty incredible all the brain power that is there, and there's some really interesting, cool topics. Check out the agenda to see some of the other topics that we didn't even drill into. But yeah, so that kind of starts to round it out here. We had a really great time. So thanks to all the DEF CON organizational committee. Thanks to Dark Tangent and co. Here's this kind of low resolution picture of us, but this is us. I think on day one, I'm rocking an SBOM shirt. You're rocking a DEF CON shirt. That was a lot of fun. There's the badge too. We are talking about from the Aerospace Village, and some of the older. What are those? Those like DEF CON. That's a tapestry, right, Bryan? Like,
Yeah,
what was that?
all the different DEF CON arts from over the years.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So um, that I think concludes everything here. We're a little bit short on time, so we won't jump into the Q&A, but I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you're looking to learn more or want to hear more about Bryan and I's experience, please feel free to reach out to us, and I'm certainly happy to kind of guide you, and hopefully we'll see you there next year.
Take care.
Cheers.
Done.